All right, thank you guys so much for coming. I want to talk about authenticity. A lot of you guys know me. I cannot stand when we use words and nobody defines what they mean.
Yeah.
People just assume what they mean. And I think this issue of keeping it real, being 100, I'm just going to be me, take me or leave it, and authenticity is such a big theme. It's important for us to kind of drill down on that and make sure we actually understand what it is, because it's true. You aim at stuff and you hit it. And if you're not aiming at the right thing, you're going to hit the target. And so if you don't even know what authenticity is, that's a dangerous thing to be looking at. And I happen to believe that there's a price tag for authenticity. And I happen to believe that sometimes we aren't authentic because the price tag for being authentic is a lot higher than being our false self. And so I'm excited to have this discussion. I think a lot of people are going to benefit. So I've asked you guys some questions surrounding authenticity, and so let's get at it. So first and foremost, when you guys hear the word authenticity, what comes to your mind? What do you think authenticity is?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is a person being genuine. If they're saying that they're this person, presenting that they're this particular person, and being genuine to who they present to be.
Good. What else?
Integrity for me. I think about integrity. Because the claim of authenticity, if you're going to be that, and if they're striving for that, then there has to be a true nature to what you're presenting. And so when you do that, it is regardless of who's around, regardless of what space you're in, there's just like one specific thing that you present. And to me, that's integrity.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of times the conversation about authenticity tends to be outwardly focused, but I personally think it's knowing who you are and then being that person. So I think for me, it starts internally.
Ah, that's good. It starts internally. What else?
I'd say being courageous and secure enough to be your true self with or without the fear of rejection or not feeling good enough or abandonment.
Say that for the people in the
That's
back.
good.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you are afraid
Yeah.
and it's easier to fake the funk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But authenticity would be to show up even if you're afraid.
That's good. With or without fear. That's a
Yeah.
good point.
Yeah. What makes being authentic so hard?
Fear of judgment.
Yeah, your environment.
So let's talk about this fear of judgment. Well, talk a little bit more about that. What does that look like practically?
Well, because you don't know how, like you're coming, like Keisha was saying, you're coming as yourself, and then you're around people that you don't necessarily know how they're going to feel about how you're showing up or how your true character is. So sometimes when you're in the room, you survey the room and be like, how can I fit into the room?
Where does that come from? Do you guys think we learn that?
Yeah.
Or do you think you do? How?
Absolutely.
To me, that's programming.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think fundamentally for us, specifically here in America, it starts day one in school, kindergarten. You're told what to be, how you should be. To me, in some senses, that kind of removes your identity because you're supposed to assimilate.
Yeah. There's a familial component to that too, because
Truly.
even I think about like even my grandchild, one of them. Often we tell kids to be quiet, or we tell them what they're supposed to do. Like kids aren't supposed to be loud, or kids aren't supposed to be expressive, and all these things. So we program them to Jay's point to be a specific way. So we kill it. Even before we get to society, it can get killed in the home.
That's good.
And you shut you learn to shut down, like whoever you are, you shut it down to fit in at your house before you even go out in public.
Family of origin stuff.
Yeah. All it takes sometimes is one experience of rejection. You don't want to feel that again. So what can I do? What can I change to never have that feeling again.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Is authenticity rewarded? Or do you get more reward for being your false self or your real self? What do you think?
Probably
Other
both
people,
sides,
I
yeah.
think other people feel rewarded because they feel more comfortable with your false self. So sometimes you dim your light or yourself to appease other people, to make them feel more comfortable. So they get the reward, but you are dying inside. Or at least that's been my experience when I have not walked that out.
I think it's contingent. I think that there are spaces that you can be in where people kind of require that of you. Because I think some people can tell when you're not actually being who you are.
Yeah.
But I think there are other spaces where it's not welcomed. You know what I mean? And so I think even for me specifically, when I think about kind of my personal relationships and then when I think about kind of the corporate world, those are two completely different spaces, two completely different environments
For sure.
that I've had to learn how to navigate. What does it look like for Jay to be Jay? Because they say don't be. Really what Jay is, they don't want. You know what I mean? When I do think in some senses what Jay is, they do need. Right?
Yeah, that's a whole podcast in of itself. How do you navigate the workplace with authenticity in a way that's both useful and true? And that's called wisdom.
Yeah.
Most of us only learn that the painful way. Don't get fired. You're like, I listened to the podcast. They told me to be me, and I lost my job.
Let's also,
Keeping it broke.
let's also say don't quit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've been that guy.
Oh, talk about that.
Yeah, so I quit a job because I was big mad that they would not honor me as I know myself to be.
Not you.
Yeah.
Not you.
So it put me in a situation where I was actually unemployed for 11 months. So to your point, I don't think you have to learn that way. I had to learn that way, right? But I think wisdom would say, hey, there's another way to kind of think about this. And there's enough stories out there for us to be able to say, I can look at something that happened to somebody else and not move like that.
And I think there are levels of authenticity where I think sometimes the idea is you got to be all in or you're being false.
That's
you're
good.
Being, it's like there's levels of authenticity as long as you're not hiding and being false. I think you can be true,
That's good.
but at different levels, because I would say that's almost like a law of love for your neighbor, because not everyone can handle it. It's not always appropriate. So sometimes it requires like fast and furious speed, authenticity. Sometimes you got to be school zone speed. And it takes a long time to be able to figure out people, figure out situations, even when we talk about shame. So I think shame is almost always viewed negatively, but there's some positive aspects of shame. Like you teach your kids, yeah, I know everything within you saying you want to run outside naked right now, but and you're being real. Like but there is a certain healthy shame at it. Saying that's not helpful for you, but also everyone else. So I think it takes a lot of almost a code switching,
Yeah.
kind of understanding what's appropriate.
Talk-
So that's so that I was thinking through that thought, because code switching is not viewed positively.
Right.
And in my life's experience, it has never been. I've never had a positive experience trying to be something or fit into a space, right? So when to go back to Mike's question, like, do you get rewarded for it? I think the answer is you do get rewarded for your false self, depending upon the space that you go into, because that's the only way you'll be accepted. So that connects with code switching, because, like, you know, as a black male, oftentimes I have to do that in order to be accepted in a space. And so you get this conflict of, do I comply with that? Do I feed my family? Do I comply with that? Do I get an education? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of tension in that. So my thought was, and just to further go into that, because you mentioned it, how do you see being able to successfully do that? Because you did the school zone Fast and Furious comparison, which was cool and genius, but how do you see that working out and being beneficial, long term, because a part of a person can be, as was mentioned earlier, be dying inside when you have to put part of you away.
For me, at least, I think it's been a whole life of a lot of pain and realizing. So authenticity is a real high value for me, but it's been painful to realize what I mean by authentic. It's not what everyone can take.
Okay.
And the pain of realizing I want to be true and honest, because I think everyone would love that, and realizing for some people, you're repelling them actually.
Sure.
You're not just making them uncomfortable, you're actually not helping them.
Yeah.
And it's painful because I think there is a wrestling with I'm not being true to myself. I'm like bowing to the man or whatever. but having to learn there's appropriate levels as long as you're not lying. I do think there are distinctions there.
That's good. That's good. Okay, I appreciate that.
I think some people think of authenticity as boundless, lawlessness, like almost like a personality lawlessness. As long as I'm being true, I can blank. And I think people with transcendent morality, like Christians, people like that, were like, well, hold on a second, right? You can be fully you, 1000% you, as long as it means you're loving your neighbor.
Yeah.
Sometimes loving your neighbor means bearing their burdens. You see what I'm saying? Like sometimes loving your neighbor means weeping.
Sure.
But you know what I mean? So I think you bring up a really good point. What are some of the characteristics? Because one was mentioned, you mentioned integrity. What are some of the characteristics of a person who's authentic? Or if if we say, well, how do you know a banana's banana? Well, it's typically greenish or yellow and it has a shape to it. So you know it has characteristics. What are those characteristics of a person who's authentic?
I think one would be confidence, because you have to be confident in who you are in order to be authentic. Because if I don't actually like me, then maybe that's why I'm not being authentic. I don't want other people to see that piece of me.
I would say distinction, because when if somebody walks in a room, then everybody else who is in the room recognizes somebody that is distinct from the normal set of people, or what they bring to the table. So
they're not a clone. That's my statement. Don't overtake them. They're not clones.
I think we talked about integrity. We also talked about character. So being that same person in the dark as you are in the light, when you're around people, right, you don't feel the need to shapeshift.
Yeah.
So, but let's talk about this a little bit. So, because integrity, character, uniqueness, sometimes I think authenticity is so married to morality, to being a good person. But are you being authentic if you're actually in a season when you're being a bad person, but you're kind of, well, us religious folk would say we're being Davidic, right? We're being like, oh God, be merciful to me, a sinner. You know what I mean? Like, I messed up. Is that authenticity, or is it only authenticity if you're hitting your marks?
I
don't think so. Go ahead.
I personally feel like it's both and, right? I think, to Dan's point, this is where the risk assessment comes in, because you have to have the ability to assess risk. What does it look like for me to put myself in this space, in this situation, this particular way? And then what is the risk attached to it? Because risk doesn't have to be bad. You understand what I'm saying? Like, it can be good. That's kind of the whole idea of investing, right? You're running a risk. This could work out for me. This could not work out for me. But I think that, I think it lives in both spaces, if I'm being honest.
And I was gonna say, I think like it can be in a bad space or a bad season, and I think about our acknowledgement of the fact that we're sinners. Like we're acknowledging bad, and this is how I'm living right now.
Yeah.
And then there's the but, obviously, in Christ, etc. But you have to be authentic in that moment to admit to the fact that you're sinful and broken. Grief is another space. If you're sad, if you're grieving, it would be inauthentic to act like you're not sad.
Yeah.
You know, the whole, how you doing? Oh, God is good. Everything's great. No, it's not. And it's okay for it to not be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lack of authenticity because we try to project a false self, even as believers, to say, well, this is what I should look like as a Christian in this space, as opposed to this is what I really look like as a Christian in this space.
But I think that comes from, I had this conversation yesterday, which is interesting. I think what happens is when we acknowledge the things that are not so good, not so clean, unseemly about ourselves, we have been taught to think that removes dignity.
Yes.
Yes. And
But
it does not.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
I totally
Like,
understand. Yeah.
just because I am marred does not mean I'm not beautiful.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm
Absolutely.
saying?
I agree.
And to me, the marred things about me actually help to bring about my beauty even more.
Yeah.
Because those things, in a lot of senses, I think that they tend to be exaggerations of needs and wants and desires that have not been met.
Yeah.
That I think if you have the right person or people in your life, that stuff can come to light, can rise to the surface. You know what I mean?
And that connects to what we were talking about as far as like the environmental stuff
Yes.
as it relates to our authenticity, because you're talking about, you know, if our dignity, or we feel like our dignity is lost, there's a reason for that.
Yeah.
Because people will shame you, will
Yes.
judge you because you're being true and genuine and authentic in a negative season. So I'm with you on that.
Dan and I had a conversation about this at my office, Miss Shirley's. Small peeps. But what we talked about, he brought up a really, it was really insightful. I don't know if you want to comment on it, but it was just the idea that authenticity is a presentation. So like it's presenting yourself to others in a way that's consistent with who you are. But there's something else that's happening, and that's a process. And we don't often think we're being authentic if we hide the process. So when I'm sad, I'm gonna hide that process. If I'm in sin, I'm hiding the process. If I'm doubting, I'm hiding the process. If I'm disobeying God's clear call, I'm gonna hide all those process, and I'm gonna present to you the finished product. But I don't think that's being authentic. I think authenticity involves with wisdom, but it involves relaying the process to people. So, because it means, the word means genuine, real. So there's the you in process, and then there's the you finished product, and it's all mean. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned something that immediately struck a chord. I don't think God is hiding the process. I mean, we have 66 books of process, right? That even God Himself is in, because it's not over. You know what I mean? And so I think if we could believe that, there is, I'm gonna use this word again, beauty there, right? Because in my opinion, the reason why we hide is because it's not beautiful in our minds.
Yeah, that's good.
I think we also hide, or we're often inauthentic because we've been taught to be inauthentic is to create safe space. Right, because I believe that we are often authentic to a point until someone tells us, no, you can't do that here. Then you immediately try to fit into that space.
Yeah.
Think about how when you're children, you're growing up, you're being conditioned by your parents to be who it is that they think that you should be. You're being culturally conditioned. And when you come into a space where someone says, no, you're not safe to be here, you immediately shrink back. So
Yeah.
you're taught to be inauthentic over time until when you grow older and mature, the pendulum swings back the other way. You say, I want to be my authentic self. Because it hurts too much to be inauthentic in this space.
Yeah, man.
And I think that process, it is tricky because it's always a reminder where we don't live in a vacuum, just us. Like we're the center and everything revolves around us, even this conversation of authenticity. Because I think in our culture, it's often, well, I need to be true to me, and you all need to be able to accept that. But so with my daughter, for instance, right now, one of the things we're navigating is she wants to be able to tell me everything. She doesn't like it if I give comment to her. and try,
Just listen,
because,
Daddy.
I mean, the cultural idea is I should be able to be anything, say anything with no one, and that's not being part of community.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's got to recognize even our authenticity is part of walking together with other people.
Yeah. And I also think that's important to know of the environment and your roles, right? So, for example, you as a father with your daughter, then yeah, maybe you should comment on that and express your emotions and things like that. But if you were a counselor or counseling someone that wasn't your daughter, and someone was being genuine, authentic with you and telling you about their issues or whatever, you might inwardly feel a certain way and say, "This guy sucks." But it's your job as a counselor.
I never feel that about it.
It's your job as a counselor, and also it's loving for you as a counselor not to express that with this person who's being genuine with you and you're trying to help them, because it wouldn't be helpful. So I think that your role in the environment plays a big part of the wisdom piece of being authentic.
That's good.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about what are the characteristics of somebody who's authentic. What are some of the characteristics of a person who's not walking in authenticity?
I would say there are characteristics under the umbrella of people pleasing, in that you're constantly seeking validation or self-preservation, and so you are not code switching, but you're saying the right things. You're saying what you think other people want to hear, and so you're being inauthentic to them or to yourself by doing that. So I think it's a form of people pleasing.
I immediately thought of people who are overly nice, and admittedly I can be cynical, so I'll put that out there. But overly nice sometimes is just appeasing, and it's not necessary. Like, because there are times where, like, you know, no is appropriate and you can't is appropriate, you know. But no, I'll do it. No, it's fine. No, you're great. It's like, no, okay. Too nice is a characteristic.
I think
That's
there could
just
be
me.
a lack of self-awareness too, where you don't know who you are to be authentic, and so in any environment, you're just kind of picking up what you're getting from other people.
Yeah.
Like a chameleon.
Yep. Yep.
Something that came to my mind immediately is volatility. I think when people are not being who they are, there's a lot of ups and downs and side to sides, because nobody can keep the act going perpetually. Like, it can't last forever, and it can't last for a long time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, say that part.
It's like dating.
Real.
You
Exactly.
date,
Yeah.
you know, in the dating stage, it's just like, oh, everything's lovely. But then when you get to know that person, like, that is not the person that you showed me. What is going on here?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting because, you know, you bring up like volatility. That's something we probably wouldn't normally look at. It's not like we're trying to create, you know, a ruler for this. But it's interesting to think about, huh? Especially for ourselves and for people we love and the communities we are, because we want people to be who God created them to be, right? But yeah, I think there are some definite characteristics. Sometimes too, maybe it's just, as Ezra pointed out, maybe it's just that there are spaces and times for you to show up as like the only person in the universe that's you, with the only fingerprints you have, and maybe not stepping into whatever that is another characteristic, like always shrinking back. Any others that you can think of?
I just think I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna add people who exaggerate their accomplishments or diminish their weaknesses and areas of growth.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think it's ironic that the best place we can probably learn authenticity is a family, but it's typically the place where it's the most discouraged. Right? Like, when I think about my 4 children, they are 4 completely different people. I have encouraged them to be who they are, because I think that honors God. But that's not without being able to teach them and understand how who they are impacts the other 5 people. That's a part of the family. But I think what happens, I think nobody wants to do that work. So it's easy to just be like, don't be that. You know what I mean? Because the journey we've decided to take as parents is a lot of work. It requires so much. because you're always facilitating conflict management. You're always kind of facilitating this like weird like introspection of who this person is and who you are and why is that person mad and why did it make me upset, and this is so much work, and I get why people don't do it, but I also think it is valuable, you know, for the benefit of the child, but I also think for the benefit of the parent, because what I've learned in parenting my kids is some of the stuff that I'm teaching them is really for me. It's not for them. I'm learning. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I would say another characteristic of a person who is not authentic is being a coward.
Damn.
Right? Because a lot of, for example, while I was at work, I just got this new job. There's two Chris's. There's me and there's another Chris, and we sit right next to each other. He's about 60 years old, and I'm in my 40s. But everyone was trying to figure out, like, hey, how do you, I'm calling Chris. Which one of you? I said, just call me Black Chris. So we're both Marines, so we're like, you know, straight shooters or whatever. We're okay with that. And then the ladies walk by me and say, oh, no, we can't do that here. I don't see color. I'm like, hold on. You don't see color? You don't see a difference between us two? So in that environment, like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like, I took us aside and said, listen, you know, it's okay, you know, to see color. It actually, you know, I identify as a black man. He identifies as a white man. I'm okay with being called Black Chris.